Ford has always made powerful cars, but some of their muscle cars are unusual. With strange designs and surprising features, these weird Ford muscle cars show how bold the company can be. Number 15, 1971 Ford Falcon GTH Phase 3. Let's look at one of the strangest muscle cars ever made, the 1971 Ford Falcon GTH Phase 3. With only around 300 units produced, Ford Australia created this car specifically for the Bathurst 500, making it a true oddity in the muscle car world. It wasn't just about raw power, it was a car built for a very specific purpose, with a strange blend of performance and design. Under the hood, the Phase 3 packs a 351 cubic inch V8 engine that churns out 300 horsepower. This lets the car rocket from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.4 seconds, which was extremely fast for a four-door back in the day. It was a record breaker. It was strange for a sedan to hit those numbers. The suspension, heavy-duty and specially built to handle the beastly engine, while a 4-speed manual transmission makes shifting gears a whole different experience. And the brakes? They're noticeably larger than you'd expect, allowing the car to stop almost as fast as it accelerates. Ford went all out with the looks. The bold electric blue paint, black racing stripes, and a rear wing give it a striking, aggressive look. Inside, the black vinyl seats and wood trim create a surprising blend of sport and comfort. Phase 3 is a unique mix of performance and style, and it's hard not to be amazed by its odd but fascinating design. Number 14, 1970 Ford Ranchero. Imagine a car pickup hybrid you could get in everything from mild to wild. Yes, I'm talking about the 1970 Ford Ranchero. Imagine driving something that could haul stuff, but also race on the street. That's the Ranchero. Ford started with the compact Falcon platform, but switched things up in 1966, moving it to the midsize Fairlane body. By 1970, it was fully upgraded with the Torino's body, including a weirdly steep 57-degree sloped windshield that made it look ready to break the speed limit even when parked. There were 4 versions of the Ranchero, but let's start with the Squire. It had faux wood paneling, making it look like a fancy station wagon on steroids. Then there's the GT, which had bold side stripes and a tailgate, making it look sporty and fun. The Ranchero 500 was a bit more basic, but still a solid seller. And of course, the base model was the simplest version. Under the hood, things got even weirder. The base models came with a 6-cylinder engine or mild V8, but the GT had a powerful 220 horsepower, 302 cubic inches V8. If that wasn't enough, you could get a monster 351 engine with up to 300 horsepower or go all out with a massive 429 V8 that cranked out 370 horsepower. With a shaker hood scoop, locking hood pins and sporty badges, this Ranchero was not your average pickup. Weird, wild, and full of muscle, the 1970 Ranchero is a true oddity in the world of cars. Number 13, 1978 Ford Mustang 2 King Cobra. Next on the list is the weird and honestly disappointing 1978 Ford Mustang 2 King Cobra. If you're looking for the worst-looking muscle car ever, this one's a serious contender. Ford tried to slap some muscle car styling onto a regular family car and hoped no one would notice. The Mustang 2 was introduced during the 1973 oil crisis, so Ford made it smaller and more fuel efficient. That sounds good for a daily driver, but here's the thing. It was based on the Ford Pinto. Yep, that's right. The same Pinto is known for being a bit of a dud. Instead of looking tough like the classic Mustangs, this thing looked watered down and weak. For muscle car fans, it was a nightmare. The top engine option, a 302 cubic inches V8, was a total letdown, putting out only 133 horsepower. That's a far cry from the powerful Cobra jets of the 1960s. Ford tried to fix things in 1978 with the King Cobra. It came with over-the-top styling, spoilers, louvers, stripes, and a huge Cobra decal on the hood. The idea was to make it look tough, but it came across as tacky. Under the hood, it is the same weak 302 V8 with no extra power. It could only manage a top speed of 104 miles per hour, which didn't exactly scream muscle. Unsurprisingly, the King Cobra sold only 4,313 units before Ford gave up and moved on to the next generation of Mustangs. Weird, right? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome content. Number 12, 1974 Ford Gran Torino. The 1974 Ford Gran Torino was a big, bold car that seemed to promise more than it could deliver. Despite its hefty size and powerful engine options, it wasn't the muscle machine you might expect. It featured a 452 cubic inches V8, which would have pushed over 400 horsepower in earlier years. But by 1974, thanks to stricter emissions rules, it only produced 220 horsepower with 355 pound-feet of torque. This meant it took about 9.6 seconds to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour, slower than you might think for such a muscular-looking car. The Torino had a classic rear-wheel drive setup with the engine up front, but it wasn't exactly a speed demon. The design also saw some significant changes that year. Due to government regulations, the car got new, larger bumpers designed to withstand low-speed impacts. The taillights were now sleek wraparound rectangles, and the fuel filler was cleverly hidden behind a door on the taillight panel. Moreover, higher-end models like the Gran Torino Brougham came with a full-width reflector panel between the tail lights and a fancy stand-up hood ornament, giving it a unique, upscale look. It may not have been the powerhouse it once was, but the 1974 Gran Torino still had a presence, if only in looks. Number 11, 1969 Ford Torino Talladega. The 1969 Ford Torino Talladega is a weird, rare muscle car that somehow flew under the radar for many years. It was only made for a short time at the start of 1969, and it's named after the Talladega Superspeedway, where Ford wanted to boost their NASCAR game. The trick was they needed to make 500 of these cars for the public, thanks to racing rules, and that's where the Talladega was born. The Talladega was based on the fastback design of the regular Torino, but with a twist. Ford gave it a sleeker front end that stretched the car by 6 inches to help it slice through the air more efficiently. This is no ordinary Torino. Under the hood, you had a hefty 335 horsepower V8 engine, which helped it go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.6 seconds. It could even top out at a wild 129 miles per hour. Despite its performance, some folks think the Talladega's looks could be more pretty. It's often labeled as one of the oddest muscle cars from the 1960s. But the Talladega isn't just about looks. It's all about that crazy speed. It even had some crazy mods like reshaped rocker panels, a custom air dam, and a cool black hood and rear tail panel. With a massive 440 pound-feet of torque, this car was built for pure muscle and strange aerodynamics. Number 10, 1970 Ford Torino GT Convertible. The 1970 Ford Torino GT Convertible is a strange muscle car, especially with its quirks and unexpected features. Let's start with the color. It originally left the factory in bold yellow, but it got a red paint job somewhere along the way. For some, this might be a deal breaker since it's no longer in its original shade, but it's still a pretty wild ride. Under the hood, this Torino packs a 301.6 cubic inch V8 engine, delivering 220 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. It's not the fastest in its class, but it can still hit a top speed of about 119 miles per hour. That's enough power to turn heads even if it's not setting any land speed records. This Torino also comes with a bunch of strange but practical options. It has air conditioning. For a muscle car, that's not something you'd expect. Power steering and power windows, making it more of a comfy cruiser than a no-nonsense speedster. It even has hideaway headlights, like something straight out of a superhero car. And then there's the interior. It has vinyl bucket seats, which sound pretty basic, but what's inside that counts. The whole car has been well maintained, so aside from the paint change, it's in pretty good shape. But let's be real, it's not the most typical muscle car, with its weird mix of features and surprising color change. Number 9, 1969 Ford Mercury Marauder X100. The 1969 Ford Mercury Marauder X100 is one strange muscle car, not just because of its odd name. Mercury wasn't usually in the game with big muscle cars, but they decided to throw their hat in the ring with this weird beast. The X100 had the front end of a regular Mercury Marquis, but a rear end that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. With its huge rear fenders and flying buttress-style roof, this car looked ready for takeoff. Despite its size, the Marauder X100 is a little smaller than the four-door Mercury, sitting on a wheelbase that's only 10 feet long. But don't let that fool you. It still weighs around 4,300 pounds. Mercury dropped in a big engine to get that massive car moving. A 360 horsepower, 429 cubic inch V8. What's even crazier, it cranks out 480 pound-feet of torque at just 2,800 revolutions per minute. That's some serious grunt, especially considering the car's size. One quirky feature of this car is the roof. About half of the X100s were made with a matte black tunnel roof, but this one didn't have it. Instead, it was one solid color. The interior, original, with a little TLC to clean it up and replace the carpet. The car's all-black finish gives it a bold look, especially after a fresh paint job. This car is big, strange, and not your typical muscle car, more of a rolling oddity from the past. Number 8, 1969 to 1970, Ford Mustang Boss 302. The 1970 Ford Mustang Boss 302 is a strange piece of muscle car history with some truly oddball specs that set it apart. First, there's the engine, a 302 cubic inch V8 that was souped up with big port cylinder heads meant for Ford's famous Cleveland 351 engine. It's a solid lifter small block, sporting a giant 780 CFM Holley carburetor, though Ford claimed it only made 290 horsepower. That's the same as Chevy's Z28, but this boss had an odd, less rev-happy engine with a 6,000 RPM limiter to keep things from getting too wild. Underneath, Ford went all in with race-inspired modifications. The car came standard with a 4-speed Hurst shifter and a set of gears ranging from 3.50 to 4.30 for maximum torque. The wheels were wrapped in F60 X15 polyglass tires, and the suspension was built for corners, not speed. But don't expect it to beat a Z28 in a straight line. Where it lacked in raw speed, it made up for in cornering prowess. The design? That's where things get a little odd. The Boss 302 came with a front spoiler, but the fender vents were sealed up. No cool air for the engine, just an empty aesthetic. There were also optional rear airfoils and backlight blinds for an added racer look. Plus, it had a shaker hood scoop that made the engine look even bigger than it was. It's a strange mix of performance and style that made the Boss 302 a weird, flexible muscle car. Number 7, 1964 Ford Falcon Sprint V8. The Ford Falcon Sprint hardtop is a quirky little rear-wheel drive coupe with the engine tucked up front. Powered by a naturally aspirated, petrol-fueled, 262 cubic inch V8 engine, it runs on a 90-degree overhead valve setup with 2 valves per cylinder. This engine cranks out 164 horsepower at 4,400 RPM, with a decent 258 pound-feet of torque at just 2,200 RPM. All that power gets to the wheels through a 4-speed manual transmission, giving it a somewhat retro but functional feel on the road. But here's where things get weird. This Falcon Sprint had a previous life as a pro street car, complete with huge 33-inch tires, aluminum tubs, ladder bars on the rear axle, drum brakes, and a Ford 302 engine with a performance cam. The result? It was a 50-yard car that looked fast but didn't quite deliver on the go. Fast forward, and Rick and his family decided to breathe new life into this oddball by turning it into a restaurant. They ditched the over-the-top pro street parts with a more street-friendly setup, adding a Mustang 2-style independent front suspension, custom back half, and a 4-link rear suspension with a Ford 9-inch rear. The wheels were swapped for modern 17-inch shot 5-spoke rims, and Willwood disc brakes were added. But the strangest part? The car originally had a factory split-back bench seat instead of bucket seats. Not what you'd expect from a sporty Falcon. Number 6, 1968 Ford Cougar XR7G. In 1968, Ford decided to spice things up with the Cougar, introducing a bunch of quirky trims like the XR7, XR7G, and the GTE. But the XR7G was something else, as it borrowed inspiration from the Dan Gurney special of the previous year. This Cougar had some odd features. signature decals, turbine-style wheel covers, and an engine dress-up kit in chrome. But the real kicker was the GTE model, which stepped things up with a huge 390 horsepower, 427 cubic inch V8 engine. This beast had a 3-speed automatic transmission, quad exhaust outlets, special badging, and a body that sported argent lower body paint below the chrome trim. But here's where it gets weird. In April 1968, Ford swapped out the 427 engine for a 428 Cobra Jet V8. The oddest part, they also made a 4-speed manual transmission available in case you wanted more control over your ride. The Cougar was also enhanced with safety features like side marker lights, front shoulder belts, and separate harnesses for protection. But the strange option was the electrically operated sunroof, available on any Cougar, though nobody went for it. For those who wanted more luxury, the XR7 package was the way to go. It added better gauges, wood trim, toggle switches, and upgraded seats. A strange combination of luxury and muscle. Number 5, 1969 Ford Mercury Cyclone, Spoiler 2. The 1969 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2 is like a strange mashup of aerodynamic tweaks and racing ambitions. It all started with Ford and Chrysler Aero Wars in NASCAR, and Mercury jumped in with its version of a sleek fastback car, the Cyclone. The front end was given a bizarre redesign that added about 6 inches to the car's length, replacing the original grille with a flush mount one borrowed from the Ford Torino Talladega, making it smoother at high speeds. But here's where it gets weird. The rocker panels were reshaped and rolled to let the race cars sit an inch lower, making them more stable at top speeds while still following NASCAR rules. Mercury equipped the Cyclone Spoiler 2 on-the-street versions with a 351 cubic inch Windsor V8 engine, producing 290 horsepower. Given the car's sporty looks, with an automatic transmission and a bench seat, which felt old school, here's the kicker. The race versions were faster thanks to subtle aerodynamic tweaks, but the street versions were slower. A strange visual touch? The Cyclone Spoiler 2 came in 2 special paint schemes, one for Dan Gurney and one for Kel Yarbrough, with wild color combos like Presidential Blue and Wimbledon White or Candy Apple Red roofs. Mercury produced between 300 and 500 units, making the whole thing feel like a bizarrely unnecessary, yet visually striking marketing move. Number 4, 1963 Ford Galaxy Lightweight. In 1963, Ford made a weird decision to build a limited batch of 200 Galaxies for the drag strip, and they took weight saving to a new level. The car was designed to be a stripped-down powerhouse, sporting the massive 427 cubic inch engine with dual 4-barrel carburetors, delivering a mind-boggling 425 horsepower. But Ford didn't stop there. They cut nearly everything that wasn't essential. The most curious feature was the body. To lighten the load, they swapped steel panels for fiberglass ones, including the front fenders, hood, and trunk lid. The front and rear bumpers, they were made of thin aluminum. As for the interior, it was practically bare. Gone were the comfort features like a radio, clock, armrests, and even the roof cross support. What remained were basic Bostrom lightweight bucket seats and rubber floor mats. Just the essentials for drag racing. The car also had a T10 4-speed transmission and a heavy-duty suspension to handle the raw power. The frame was lightened, and the trunk spring torsion bars, side mirrors, and backup lights were removed. To add to the strangeness, the car had a rear axle ratio of 4.11:1 and was missing sound deadening and body seam sealers. Ford's goal was to create the ultimate drag racer, and while it wasn't luxurious, it was laser-focused on speed and reduced weight, making it a strange, minimalistic beast. Number 3, 1973 Ford Falcon XB GT Hardtop. The Ford Falcon XB GT Hardtop from 1973 had some odd features, beginning with its surprisingly high-performance engine. It was powered by a 351 cubic inch V8, which generated an output of about 300 horsepower, sending the car to a top speed of around 132 miles per hour. This was far from ordinary for a vehicle of this size, yet Ford made it blend into a seemingly standard vehicle. What's truly strange about the XB Tour is its mix of basic and advanced components. The car came equipped with a top-loader 4-speed gearbox, but it wasn't just any transmission, it was a relic from the past, as Ford was transitioning to different setups. Given the shift in the automotive industry at the time, this is a rare and odd combination. In addition, the engine was equipped with a 4-barrel carburetor, yet only 211 of these vehicles featured this specific configuration. The bodywork also tells a curious tale. The car was shipped from the factory with significant rust in poorly repaired places. Despite the challenging state, the car was painstakingly restored, with the original rear quarter and roof being the only untouched parts. Even the paint, originally attempted with a poor finish, was eventually corrected with a stunning red pepper hue, one of those small details that made the XB GT stand out, even if its history was far from smooth. Number 2. 1964 Ford Thunderbolt. The Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt from 1964 is one of those cars that doesn't look like a race car at first glance, yet packs an engine that's strange in its power. Under the hood, you'll find a 427 cubic inch V8, a monstrous engine that churns out about 425 horsepower. Some even argue it pushes closer to 500 horsepower, though Ford wasn't too keen on making that official. What's truly odd, however, is how this car doesn't just accelerate, it practically launches. It can go from 0 to 60 miles per hour in a mere 4.6 seconds, which is absurd for a car resembling an everyday sedan. This Thunderbolt is also a drag strip monster, blasting through the quarter mile in just 11.8 seconds at a top speed of 123 miles per hour. What's even stranger is how Ford made it so light. Fiberglass panels replace the standard body in the interior. Well, it's stripped down to almost nothing, as you'd expect for a drag racing machine. The Thunderbolt's exterior isn't a flashy race car design, but it does sport some peculiar features like the raised hood to fit that huge engine. The headlights also follow an unusual pattern. One headlight is often missing on each side. It's a subtle change that marks it as something much more than a regular Fairlane. Number 1. 1970 Ford Capri Piranha. The Ford Capri V8 Piranha from 1970 is a bizarre blend of a sleek European sports car with the muscle usually reserved for American muscle machines. The engine, a 501 cubic inch V8, derived from the Ford Mustang's famous 302 Windsor engine. It's not just an engine, a 4-barrel Holley carburetor-fed powerhouse that pushes around 281 horsepower. And to handle all that, Ford slapped on a Borg-Warner limited slip differential, alloy bell housing, and a custom-made strengthened prop shaft. These aren't typical features you'd expect on a compact European car. Then the suspension and braking systems were modified to cope with the power. The Piranha was equipped with new coilovers, gas-adjustable shocks, and a new braking system with larger discs and calipers up front. For the rear, gas-adjustable shocks and specialized springs were added to keep the car grounded, which is essential when making nearly 300 horsepower. Inside, it's a curious mix of luxury and racing. The period-correct basket weave upholstery matches a custom carpet imported from Australia. The dash wiring was even modified for easy removal. The engine was rebuilt with precision. New pistons, camshaft, heads, and a custom-made exhaust system ensure this Piranha doesn't just go fast, but sounds as powerful as it looks. Which of these unusual Ford muscle cars would you most like to take for a spin, and what makes them stand out in performance vehicles? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below.